Hello and a very warm welcome to each and every one of you today to the Rapture for the Overcomers ministry. This is Richard here in the UK. Thank you for your time. And today we are going to talk about some specific news reports that are coming through relating to Israel, relating to the Abraham Accords, and relating to what the United States administration are trying to do within the United Nations. So thank you for being here. I hope you're all well, brethren, and serving the Lord faithfully. This ministry is all about the end times, Bible prophecy, surrounding Israel in particular, and of course the pre-tribulation rapture. And I thought to come on today because I've got a few interesting articles that I want to share. Now, I've got them off the Telegram of Amir Tsarfati. Now, I just follow Amir Tsarfati mainly for the news reports. I don't very often agree with his analysis or what he teaches in other respects, but I do look at his news reports because he is excellent for providing up-to-date news, particularly pertaining to Israel and the end times. And I felt that it's very important that I share this information with you today, brothers and sisters, because it might be that you're not aware of this information. And it is important in terms of what we're looking for in the end times. And we know that it's all about the timing of the rapture is linked to the signing of the covenant with many. The Abraham Accords, I believe personally, will be strengthened and confirmed, and that will start the 7-year tribulation period. Now, as I spoke a couple of days ago on the video that I did, a part 1 on a teaching, and I'm hoping to do a part 2 as well very soon. I just want to sort of mention again that within that, what I mentioned was that we were in a bit of a lull. We're in a bit of a lull in terms of what's going on with Gaza, with Hamas and the Abraham Accords. Well, there's certain information that I just think I need to share. Firstly, and this didn't surprise me at all, it's something which I've said already is going on behind the scenes. The pressure from the US administration coming on Israel. We've talked about this, haven't we, before? How the United States are starting to pressure Israel into peace and security and into the expansion of the Abraham Accords and ultimately to the recognition of a Palestinian state. That's what it's about. And we've got an article here that Amir Tsarfati shared, and he says this: by United States mission to the United Nations. So the United States administration are putting a proposal forward to the UN, and this is what they've sent, and it says this: we are issuing this statement as the member states that gathered during high-level week. That was back, remember, in September at the United Nations. Do you remember the meeting there? And this is alluding to the Arab nations and those meetings they had behind the scenes. So it says high-level week to begin this process. Remember, they voted in for a two-state solution, didn't they, for a Palestinian state, which offers a pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood. So now the Americans are coming out quite clearly with what their intention is. We emphasize that this is a sincere effort and the plan provides a viable path towards peace and stability, not only between the Israelis and the Palestinians, but for the entire region. So let me just explain what's happening there. This is now the American administration going directly to the UN and saying we want meetings and we're going to bring forth proposals to push forward for a plan, a process to bring about a pathway to a Palestinian statehood. This is what it's trying to say. And so the idea that Trump was giving out about being indifferent about a Palestinian state, and some people were saying, and Amir Tsarfati's always said that Trump won't allow for a Palestinian state. Well, I think that's been proven to be nonsense, to be honest. As I've said all along, Trump is going to push for a Palestinian state. Make no mistake about it. And then Amir's comment is this: the above, referring to what I just read about what the Americans have put forward, the above is the latest addition to the proposal that the Trump administration submitted to the UN Security Council, introduced under pressure from Egypt, Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Now notice here that Amir Safati is saying that the Americans have put this forward to the UN. They've submitted this proposal because really they're under pressure from Egypt and Qatar and Saudi Arabia, because he doesn't want to acknowledge that actually no, Trump is behind it all. It's not just the Arab nations that are pressuring for this. This is Trump at work. He is the one pressuring for this situation, but Amir Safati sadly is in denial of this. Anyway, he goes on and says this, does Amir: do I like it? Question mark. Absolutely not. Of course he doesn't. He hates the thought that Trump might be involved in anything to do with a Palestinian state, and he hates the thought of anything to do with the Abraham Accords being expanded. Okay, so we go on and we go to the next part of what he says. However, the wording is identical to the 2020 deal of the century, once again with one major condition. You see, remember I've talked over and over and over again on this ministry about 2020. Remember I go on about January 2020 when Trump and Netanyahu were before the world cameras and they were dividing the land of Israel with the creation of a Palestinian state alongside the Jewish Israeli state and the creation of a Palestinian capital in East Jerusalem. And I've said all along that that is what's going to happen. Anyway, so Amir, and I did contact him at that time and said, this is what's going to happen. I'm afraid Trump will divide the land. And then anyway, it says there, and he said with one major condition. So this is Amir saying this now. The Palestinian Authority must first undergo sweeping reforms. Okay, these include a complete overhaul of its educational textbooks and an end to payments to the families of convicted terrorists imprisoned in Israel. Now, if we know what's going on in the last few months, we know that Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, has been positioning himself and changing his position. In other words, he's been going against Hamas and he's been making overtures and sounds to the effect that he is prepared for peace and he's prepared to recognize Israel. Well, we know it's all fake. That man is never going to change, and nor is the Palestinian Authority. But what the Palestinian Authority are doing is trying to persuade the Americans and others that they're on their side and that they're ready for a Palestinian state and that they're going to behave and they're going to do as they're told. And this is part of the deception. It's part of the trick that's going on behind the scenes, so that they're going to put more pressure. If the Palestinian Authority agree to do it the way that the Americans are saying, if they agree to relax their hatred of Israel and their ideology to a point, and if they take away things like their textbooks, which are anti-Israeli and anti-Jewish, and if they stop paying their stipends to the murderers, the Palestinian murderers and Hamas supporters, if they stop paying their families these stipends, these monthly wages, if they erase that, or if they secretly hide it, or if they change in some way, then they can put themselves forward as having been changed and having been learning from the past, as it were, and taking a different attitude and a way forward for peace and security in the region. And of course Trump will use this perception of a change in the Palestinian Authority. He's going to use that, I believe, to convince Israel that the time is now for peace and security and for a universal agreement in the Middle East, which will bring about the creation of the Palestinian state. Anyway, Amir goes on and says, none of this will ever happen. The real reason is whether this updated language will be enough for the Saudis and Indonesians to join the Abraham Accords. And as an aside, we know that the Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia is actually meeting in the White House, I think it's today, with Donald Trump, and they're talking about the Abraham Accords. So there's a lot still going on. And we need to be able to piece together what's happening. Because even though Amir says this will never happen, Amir Safati says this will never happen, I'm afraid it is going to happen. And then he goes on with another report, does Amir, and he says, more and more Israelis are expressing outrage. You see, some people are waking up to the deception and the truth. And rightly so, he says, over the American proposal to the United Nations Security Council that outlines a pathway to Palestinian statehood. I said all along that Donald Trump would stab Israel in the back, didn't I? I said all along that Trump would be the one who would push this agenda. And Amir now is in a state of panic. Those who have been deceived by Donald Trump, you see, those who have thought that Donald Trump's a friend of Israel, they're going to have to realise that they've been deceived, that they've been in error, that they've been fooled, to be honest. And then he says this, many are now asking, meaning the Israelis, they're starting to wake up to what's going on themselves. Quote, have we been sold out just to secure Saudi Arabia's entry into the Abraham Accords? End of quote. Question. So remember I spoke a while ago about the fact that the Saudis had long held the stance and position that they would only ever agree to join the Abraham Accords on the condition that there was the creation of a Palestinian state. We shall see what's happening. And then he says this. Now, this is where it gets interesting in the sense of how close we are to this happening. What are the obstacles? And there are obstacles. And as I think I mentioned last time, there are two major obstacles. Or I'll mention it now anyway. There are two major obstacles to get through. Okay? Before this will happen. One is Hamas must be eliminated. That's the first thing. And the second one is that Israel, the Knesset, the Israeli government, the Israeli Prime Minister must be in agreement with the creation of a Palestinian state. They must agree to it because it's an agreement which is confirmed with many Arab nations, and it will give Israel, the Jews, the facility, permission to build the third temple on the Temple Mount. So there's got to be these two things that need to happen. And it's interesting that we read from Defence Minister Israel Katz, because there seems to be opposition against this idea of a Palestinian state. And, this might mean that things might take a while. There might be some water to go under the bridge yet. Let's be clear about that. I'm trying to be as honest and as clear as I can and share the facts with you. And it says this. Israel's policy, this is now the Defence Minister, Israel Katz. Israel's policy is clear. There will be no Palestinian state. Now, Trump isn't going to like that. He's not going to like that one bit. That's for sure. And then it says, the IDF will remain at the summit of Mount Hermon and in the security zone, southern Lebanon. Gaza will be demilitarized down to the last tunnel, and Hamas will be disarmed in the yellow zone by the IDF and in old Gaza by the international force or by the IDF. Now there's talk about this international force which Trump and the Arab nations are trying to put together. They're calling it the International Stabilization Force. There's different names for it, but they're trying to put a force on the ground in Gaza to demilitarize and to defeat Hamas. And Hamas don't want anything to do with it. They've come out and said, no, we're not having it. We're not agreeing to this force. Now, Gideon Saar, the foreign minister in Israel, says, Israel is grappling with an extraordinary phenomenon. Terror states, brackets, terrorist organizations controlling territory. 3 of them are still fighting it, meaning Israel, with the aim of destroying it. Hamas from Gaza, Hezbollah from Lebanon, and the Houthis from Yemen. Israel will not agree to the establishment of a Palestinian terror state in the heart of the land of Israel, at a negligible distance from all its population centres and with topographical control over, and it goes on and on. That's what he says. Basically, what Amir says there, after what Gideon Saar has just messaged, is this. Israel's foreign minister is also against the Palestinian state. And that's quite clear, isn't it? That's quite clear that Gideon Saar, Israel Katz, seem to be against the creation of a Palestinian state. Now, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu opened a cabinet meeting, I think it was yesterday, with a blunt clarification. Israel's policy has not changed. No Palestinian state under any circumstances. Wow. Wow. That's going to put Israel, that's going to put Benjamin Netanyahu into a head-on collision with Donald Trump. That's what's going to happen here. Israel is going to be in a predicament soon. They're going to be in a major predicament because the pressure is going to come on from Trump and his administration. Now, reading on, it says, Netanyahu's statement comes directly in response to the US-backed amendment, which we read earlier, inside the new UN framework for Gaza, which shifts language. See how Trump is doing it bit by bit? Shifts language, you see, this is what he's doing. I said it would happen like this. Toward endorsing a, quote, pathway to Palestinian statehood, which what that original statement I read earlier, a pathway to a Palestinian statehood. So the American message to the UN and the framework is changing. The terminology, the diction that they're using, the language, the words, the concepts are now changing. The pressure is being added upon Israel. And this was inevitable. If you're awake, if you've got the Holy Spirit wisdom, you knew that this was inevitable. And then it says, his message to Washington, this is Netanyahu's message to Washington, was unmistakable. Israel rejects any political process that advances Palestinian sovereignty west of the Jordan River. In other words, into the land of Judea and Samaria. Wow. Very, very important developments. Now, final message that I want to share is this. Amir Safati put this up as well. Israel and the Trump administration are on a collision course regarding Saudi Arabia and its demands for joining the Abraham Accords. The sale of F-35 aircraft and recognition of a Palestinian state are red lines, one less severe than the other, but neither acceptable. Israel is the only country in the world permitted to add new features to the American stealth fighter, but this comes in exchange for sharing the data with the manufacturer. And then he says, as for the recognizing a Palestinian state, after the October the 7th massacre, that would be a reward for terrorism and is completely unacceptable to an overwhelming majority of the Israeli public. Wow. Wow. This is quite dramatic news, really, because, you know, the rapture is dependent upon the signing of that covenant. And that covenant will bring about the two-state solution and the creation of a Palestinian state. So either one of two things has to happen. If the rapture is going to happen very soon, the strong likelihood is that one of two things has got to happen. One, either the Israelis back down, the Israelis will need to back down, and the Trump administration and the Arab nations force them into that position. And also the surrender of Hamas, the destruction, the demilitarization of Hamas in Gaza. So either, well, I can only see it that way, that at some point the Israelis are going to have to change their position. Yeah, I mean, I'm struggling to see if anybody else has got any other ideas, and I don't know. But one final quote is this, that the IDF Chief of Staff, Zamir, in Rafah said, quote, alongside the current operational process, we must be prepared for a rapid transition to a broad offensive to seize territory in the Gaza Strip beyond the yellow line. Remember now, Israel have withdrawn, haven't they, on the map to that yellow line, but Hamas are still in Gaza itself. We will achieve the dismantling of Hamas and the demilitarization of the Strip either through an agreement or by military means. So something has got to happen. I just do not see how the Trump administration are going to back down. I just don't see it. I don't see how the Trump administration are going to back down, because that is what they're focusing on. That is their purpose in all of this, to force Israel, to push Israel to accept the Palestinian state. So I don't know what's going to happen. Is there going to be more wars? Bearing in mind what's happening now, Israel, the Israelis are going to possibly have to go in, the IDF go into Gaza. How is this international force going to get rid of Hamas? These are all questions, and it all takes time. Hamas have re-strengthened in Gaza. Hamas are stronger now than they were 2 months ago. So where do we go from here? I'm only sharing you the information. I'm only sharing you what's going on. And at the moment, it's not looking like that this peace agreement is going to take shape in the near future. If Israel is determined, if the Israeli government are determined, and the leaders in Israel determined not to have a Palestinian state, not to allow that to happen, then this might be a process which takes a while. I don't know. I'm not saying I know, because I don't know. I don't think any of us know. I'm only sharing with you the situation. And, is it possible that at some point the Americans will put so much pressure? That's the way I think it's going to go. I don't know for sure, but I can only see the outcome that one day they're going to bring about the Abraham Accords, and Israel are going to have to accept a two-state solution. How we get to that point right now looks messy, looks complicated, and if anything, it looks a bit of time away, unless something dramatic happens. Israel may be pushed and forced and bullied, I use that word, by Trump to that point. We don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. But I thought to share that with you. I thought to keep you updated and to share what's going on. And by all means, if anybody's got any more information or any ideas of how it's going to plan out, then that's great. Put it in the comment section. We're all looking together, aren't we, for what's happening. And we know that the sign of our Lord's coming is related to the peace agreement. So I'm just sharing you what the updates are. Things can change quickly. We know that. Obviously, the Saudis going to America today, to the White House. Will they join the Abraham Accords? But they have said previously that they can't do that unless there's the creation of a Palestinian state. So it's interesting times. But right now, the two barriers are Hamas need to be removed, I think, personally. And secondly, the Israeli government. Something is going to have to happen for them to accept the Palestinian state. There we are. I hope this important update will at least give us some clarity and understanding on what we're looking for as the days progress. Until now, take care. God bless, and I hope to see you soon on the second part of the teaching, which I hope to upload in the near future. Take care now. God bless you all, and keep serving the Lord faithfully. Bye for now.